trying. Imagine for a second that you are just completely lost in a foreign country. Like, let's say you've been dropped right into the middle of India.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Right? And you don't speak a single word of any local language, and absolutely no one around you speaks yours.
Sounds incredibly stressful.
Exactly. You are totally surrounded by people. And, maybe they're even trying to be helpful, like pointing and talking loudly.
Yeah.
But nothing makes sense. The signs, the gestures, the cultural expectations, it's all just, it's an overwhelming wall of static.
Yeah, just sensory and social overload.
Right. So now imagine feeling that exact same way, but you aren't in a foreign country. You are sitting in your own living room surrounded by your own family.
Wow.
Yeah. An invisible wall of static is the daily reality of high-functioning autism. And today on the deep dive, we are looking at this radical new toolkit designed to basically tear that wall down.
That's a fascinating set of sources we've got today.
It really is. We are examining the personal notes, clinical methodologies, and promotional materials of an intuitive autism therapist. But, and here is the crucial detail, this therapist doesn't just treat high-functioning autism from the outside looking in. He actually has the condition himself.
Which, that fundamentally changes the entire paradigm of care.
Right.
Because in almost every traditional therapeutic setting, you have a neurotypical professional observing neurodivergent behaviors. It's inherently this, academic observational approach.
They're looking at symptoms on a checklist.
Exactly. The professional is trying to interpret those symptoms through a completely neurotypical lens. But what we have in these sources is lived experience. This therapist is using his own neurological makeup as the primary tool to decode and translate for his clients.
Okay, let's unpack this because it requires us to completely abandon how we typically think about therapy. This isn't a medical professional trying to fix a broken mind.
No, not at all.
It's like a native speaker trying to translate a marginalized language.
Oh.
And the author argues that anyone listening to this deep dive, whether you have a neurodivergent loved one or you just want to understand how different human minds operate, you can use these insights to completely rewire how you handle interpersonal friction.
Yeah. And the foundation of his entire philosophy really rests on drawing a hard line between what he calls a normal approach and a kindred approach.
I noticed that terminology in the notes.
Yeah.
And normal definitely isn't being used as a compliment here, is it?
Oh, far from it. The normal approach to dealing with high-functioning autism, or HFA, is entirely based on neurotypical expectations. Right. It approaches the individual from a place of behavioral demands and, frankly, shame. It's this constant barrage of, why aren't you making eye contact? Or why are you obsessing over that toy?
Why aren't you socializing like everyone else?
Exactly. And according to the source, subjecting an HFA individual to this kind of engagement leads directly to high mutism and closed doors. The person just completely shuts down.
Because they are essentially being judged by the standards of a country they don't even live in.
That's a perfect way to put it. The kindred approach, on the other hand, operates from the opposite direction. It approaches the person from a place of their own natural inclinations.
Which makes sense.
Right. And the author is very firm on this. He says the kindred approach only works if it's delivered by someone who natively understands the HFA mind. Neurotypical thinkers, he argues, will never truly grasp the kindred way unless HFA individuals explicitly map it out for them.
Which actually brings up what I thought was the most striking analogy in the entire stack of sources. The therapist compares the neurotypical mind and the HFA mind to two fundamentally different operating systems.
Yes, the computer analogy. It's brilliant.
It really is. He likens the HFA mind to an Apple Macintosh system and the neurotypical mind to a Microsoft Windows system. I just love this mental model.
It works so well.
Right. Because if you try to run Microsoft software on an Apple computer, the machine doesn't just struggle to run the program, it completely crashes. The file formats don't match, the base code is gibberish to the processor. So are traditional therapists essentially just IT people trying to force a Windows update onto a Mac?
The author would say absolutely yes. They are trying to install normal.exe onto a Mac system. And when they do that, the machine throws up error codes.
Naturally.
But we, as neurotypicals, label those error codes as negative behaviors or mutism or acting out. The IT person looks at the screen, sees the errors, and concludes the machine is broken. But the machine isn't broken.
It's just a Mac.
It's just a Mac.
It's running perfectly fine according to its own underlying architecture.
Precisely. And that is why the therapist advocates for an intuitive rather than an academic approach. You need someone who natively runs on that same Mac operating system to do the programming.
Makes total sense.
When you use the Kindred approach, the text notes developmental opportunities open up. But when you use the Microsoft approach on a Mac, those opportunities are just shut down before they're even presented.
Okay, but if he's relying entirely on his intuition as a Mac user, I have to ask the obvious question on behalf of everyone listening.
Sure.
He admits in his materials that he has zero academic training in autism care.
Right, he does.
So, is it actually safe to bypass academic training in a psychological field? I mean, that feels like a massive red flag.
It's a completely fair concern. I think any parent or patient should ask that. But we have to look closely at how he actually developed this methodology. He didn't just, invent it in a vacuum.
Okay, so where did it come from?
His expertise was forged through a very intense personal crisis. Earlier in his life, he actually suffered from severe addiction issues. And during his initial treatment, he was misdiagnosed with Asperger's syndrome.
Oh, yeah, I saw that in the notes. His sister eventually corrected that diagnosis, but why was that specific distinction so important? Like, what is the practical difference between Asperger's and HFA in this context?
Well, his sister, who notably holds a master's in autism from the University of Sheffield, by the way, clarified a vital nuance. She pointed out that Asperger's is often characterized by a strong internal desire to connect socially, but struggling with the execution and the cues.
Oh, okay.
High-functioning autism, on the other hand, can involve being perfectly content in one's own internal world without that innate driving need for neurotypical socialization.
So he was basically diagnosing himself with a broken social drive when really he just had a completely different drive altogether.
Exactly. He was punishing himself for not wanting to be a Windows computer.
Wow.
And that realization changed his entire trajectory. He realized his addiction wasn't the core disease, it was a symptom. It was a coping mechanism for living a life in denial of his own HFA architecture.
He was using substances to forcibly reboot his system every time it crashed from trying to run neurotypical software.
That's a great way to put it, yes.
So, if he realized traditional therapy wasn't built for him, how did you figure out what did work?
He essentially became his own clinical trial.
Wait, really?
Yeah. He spent a year in rehab, followed by 2 years of outside care, learning various mainstream psychological therapies to recover from his addiction. And then between 2014 and 2020, he spent 6 years intensely observing his own autism.
6 years of just self-observation.
Yes. He took those mainstream therapies and tested them on himself. He filtered traditional cognitive behavioral therapy, for instance, through his own Mac operating system to see what actually computed and what didn't.
So he isn't dismissing science. He's just translating it into the Kindred language.
Exactly.
Okay, let's talk about what that translation actually looks like in practice. If he spent 6 years treating himself like a human guinea pig, what did he discover? Because his version of CBT, specifically how he handles anxiety, is fascinating.
Oh, you mean replacement therapy?
Yes, replacement therapy.
To understand that, we have to look at the physiological root of anxiety. He points out that anxiety and excitement stem from the exact same physical profile.
Right, like your heart rate elevates, your breathing becomes shallow.
Though your mind races, you feel a restless energy buzzing in your extremities, the body honestly does not know the difference between the panic of public speaking and the thrill of riding a roller coaster.
Because the physical data is identical. The mind is just applying a catastrophic label to it. But I mean, how do you actually change that? You can't just tell someone having a panic attack, hey, be excited.
No, you don't command them to be excited. You cognitively reroute the energy. His philosophy is that every negative thought contains a kernel of usefulness.
Okay.
Traditional therapy might try to extinguish that raw energy, to calm the patient down, make them take deep breaths, lower their heart rate. But fighting your own nervous system is incredibly difficult.
It's like fighting a tidal wave.
Right. So instead, this therapist works with clients to embrace that restless energy and cognitively relabel it. He teaches them to tell themselves, my body is giving me the energy I need to tackle this challenge. I am physically preparing for something big.
Oh, I love that. He just changes the flavor of the arousal from heavy and negative to light and positive.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. You aren't fighting the wave, you're just pointing the surfboard in a different direction.
Beautifully said.
But the technique that really blew my mind is his concept of conduit learning. This completely upends how we usually handle what neurotypical people call obsessions.
Yeah, in traditional autism therapy, intense obsessions are often viewed as a major roadblock. They're seen as these rigid distractions that need to be minimized or suppressed so the individual can focus on normal educational tasks.
And he flips that entirely. He weaponizes the obsession. I mean, think about how you learn best. If you absolutely hate spreadsheets, but you were obsessed with baseball. You'd learn Excel in a single afternoon if someone showed you how to use it to track your favorite team's stats.
Right, because you care about the outcome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this therapist is doing exactly that, but applying it to profound psychological and developmental hurdles.
He uses the obsession as a bridge, a conduit, to connect the HFA individual to mundane or difficult subjects. The source notes a great example regarding a client whose obsessive interest was mathematics, but they needed to participate in sports, specifically football.
Which is usually a nightmare scenario. Throwing a mathematically minded kid onto a chaotic, socially unpredictable soccer field and yelling, "Go be a goalkeeper," is the ultimate Microsoft system expectation.
It really is. So the therapist spoke Mac. He told the client, measure the distance between the goalposts and midfield. Now, calculate the velocity of a ball flying at X meters per second. Your duty is to mathematically intercept that specific trajectory.
Oh, that is so smart. He didn't force the kid to play a social game. He turned the chaotic physical space into a safe, predictable mathematical equation.
Yes.
He actually shared a personal anecdote from his own childhood about this, didn't he?
He did, yeah. Growing up, he loved history. So during PE, when he was forced to play goalie, he didn't see himself as a kid playing a sport. He imagined he was defending castle gates from an enemy siege.
The Normans versus the Anglo-Saxons in 1066.
He mapped his historical obsession onto the physical requirement.
It's incredible framing. And he uses this same conduit method to tackle heavy emotional trauma too, like bullying.
Yeah, bullying is an incredibly complex, nuanced social dynamic. It can be devastating for an HFA individual to process. And the standard neurotypical explanation, like, oh, they're just being mean, it's vague and confusing.
So he used the cartoon masters of the universe. He framed the school bully as the villain, Skeletor, and the HFA client as the sorceress.
Right.
And he taught the client that the bully isn't just being mean. The bully is Skeletor, actively trying to drain the sorceress's magical energy. That instantly shifts the entire conversation for the client.
It moves them from a vague feeling of total powerlessness into a tangible, manageable framework of protecting their own energy.
It gives the client agency. Instead of punishing the obsession with cartoons, this method makes the cartoon the ultimate educational tool for emotional regulation.
It's brilliant.
It really is. Now, these tools clearly work wonders on an individual level.
Mm-hmm.
But as we know, nobody lives in a vacuum. Eventually, the HFA individual has to log off the Mac and interact with the Windows world. And according to the notes, this is where the most severe friction occurs.
Yes.
The therapist introduces a vital term here: autisticization.
Right. Autisticization is the process by which an HFA individual becomes even more autistic in their presentation. They withdraw further, their mutism increases, or their symptoms become significantly more pronounced. And his argument here is vital. He says this regression happens because of high normal expectations.
The pressure of trying to run the wrong software physically damages the system over time.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it completely reframes behavioral regression. Often, when an autistic child or adult regresses, caregivers panic. They think, oh no, the therapy's failing, their condition is worsening.
Yeah.
But this concept suggests that autisticization is essentially a profound systemic stress response. The regression isn't a failure of the autistic person, it is a failure of the environment. The text states very clearly, the more kindred and autistic the allowances, the more normal they become.
Stop forcing Windows updates and the Mac stops crashing.
Exactly.
It sounds like a paradox, but it makes perfect logical sense.
And a huge part of preventing those crashes comes down to how we define trust. The source notes that HFA individuals often find others untrustworthy, but he clarifies that this has nothing to do with the mechanics of a personal relationship.
It's not that the HFA person thinks their caregiver is malicious.
No, not at all. It's a matter of fundamentally differing systems clashing. He asks a brilliant question in the notes. How does a CD-ROM trust a DVD player?
Oh, man. You can't put a CD-ROM into a DVD player and get angry at the disc for not trusting the machine. They literally lack the hardware to read each other's data.
Exactly. But to the neurotypical parent or partner, that systemic incompatibility just feels like personal rejection, which leads to another major friction point mentioned in the text, the tired versus tired of me dynamic.
Yeah, this detail really highlights the emotional toll on both sides. The therapist points out that when a neurotypical caregiver is just naturally exhausted by life, work, paying bills, sitting in traffic, the HFA individual will almost always assume that the caregiver is tired of them.
Because the HFA individual is so accustomed to being a source of friction in a neurotypical world, they automatically internalize that exhaustion. They assume they're the cause.
That's heartbreaking.
It is. The therapist explicitly warns caregivers that they must proactively verbally assure their HFA loved ones that they are not tired of them. HFA individuals go through enough perceived neglect in their own internal processing, they cannot carry the added inaccurate weight of assuming they are a burden.
But that feeling of being a burden or being entirely out of control of their environment leads to extreme anxiety. There's a really illuminating case study in the notes about a client trying to delete their Facebook account.
Oh, yes. The client decided they wanted to leave the platform. But as with most social media sites, Facebook imposed a mandatory delay period before the account was fully deleted.
Anyone who has ever been locked out of their digital bank account and stuck in an automated customer service loop for 3 hours knows this exact feeling.
Right.
It's not just annoyance. It is a primal, suffocating feeling of helplessness. You've made a decision, but a faceless system is denying your agency.
And for this HFA client, that waiting period caused absolute psychological agony. The neurotypical system was forcing them to wait, inducing a state of powerlessness.
So what did the therapist do?
His solution wasn't to sit around and talk through the feelings of waiting. His solution was immediate practical action. He banned the triggering site entirely right then and there. He forbade the client from going to it, and he immediately refocused that anxious energy into empowering activities like meditation and mindfulness.
He just cut the cord. He recognized that the delay was a purely neurotypical construct causing a system crash, so he bypassed it. So we've talked about the theory, the mechanisms, the friction points. Let's look at the actual real-world results. He spent 6 years treating himself, and now treats others,
Yeah.
Does this intuitive approach actually work?
The stark contrast in his case studies is remarkable. He highlights one specific success story of a client who, when they began therapy, was what he calls a perfect mute.
Meaning they had completely shut down verbal communication. Probably due to that intense process of autisticization we just discussed, they had retreated entirely inward.
Yes. But after 4 years of this intuitive Kindred therapy, that exact same client is now employed as a barista.
Okay, think about what that actually means. A coffee shop is arguably the most chaotic sensory environment imaginable.
Oh, absolutely.
Hissing steam wands, clattering plates, overlapping conversations, and a never-ending line of unpredictable customers making rapid-fire, complex demands. Going from a perfect mute to handling that environment means the therapist successfully helped this individual map their macOS to process Windows-level chaos without crashing.
He likely used conduit learning to master the intricate sequences of coffee making and replacement therapy to turn the anxiety of a rush into the excitement of a high-speed challenge.
Wow.
The parental feedback included in the notes echoes this too. The barista's mother noted that her son is now much more expressive, mindful of others, and genuinely keen to communicate with his peers.
That's incredible. And this CD-ROM versus DVD player compatibility isn't just an abstract clinical idea either. He actually builds it directly into his business model.
He does. He's very clear about the logistics of his practice. For example, structuring his fees, which are in Malaysian ringgit, by the way. He offers the first session entirely for free. The second session is RM50, and it's RM100 for subsequent sessions.
And this isn't just a promotional funnel. He states explicitly that this structure acts as a chemistry check.
Right, because if the parent just wants to drop off their kid to be fixed into a normal Windows computer, and the therapist is teaching the kid how to be a highly functioning Mac, the client is going to be torn in half.
Yeah, that would be a disaster.
He insists there must be a kindred, comfortable fit between all three parties, the parent, the client, and himself.
And part of that chemistry involves long-term career planning. He leverages his own background here. He actually minored in career education at the University of Western Australia.
Exactly. He uses a specific career rubric worksheet to help families plan tertiary education that won't trigger autisticization.
Like the Jigsaw program you mentioned.
Yeah, he mentions placing his client in the Jigsaw program at a local TAFE EE, a technical and further education institution. It's essentially a pre-university course, but paced appropriately to avoid system overload.
But he has one very strict rule when it comes to the actual therapy. He insists that while the most loving kindred parent must collaborate and receive daily reports, the actual therapy sessions must happen strictly one-on-one. The parents are banned from the room.
Because parental presence inherently alters behavior. Even a deeply well-meaning parent carries the invisible weight of normal expectation.
Of course they do.
If the parent is in the room, the HFA client will inevitably mask their true self to appease the parent. The therapist needs total isolation with the client to access and program the real HFA person.
Which brings us to a beautiful concept he calls the balance of cheer. It's the idea that the good done for others must always be balanced with the good for oneself.
It's so important.
It really is. It's a vital lesson for the HFA individual, learning to navigate an overwhelming world. But honestly, it's just as vital for the exhausted caregivers. You cannot pour from an empty cup.
It's a stark reminder that sustainability in this dynamic requires everyone's core needs to be met, rather than just forcing one side to perpetually conform to the other.
Well, we've covered a tremendous amount of ground today. We've explored how treating high-functioning autism, not as a broken Windows PC, but as a fully functioning Mac, literally changes the trajectory of a human life.
It really does.
By using conduit learning to weaponize obsessions, by actively working to avoid the profound stress response of autisticization, and by employing intuitive therapy from someone who actually speaks the native language, a perfect mute can become a highly functioning barista.
It is a profound structural shift in perspective.
And for you listening, whether you are dealing with neurodivergence in your own family, or you are simply navigating difficult personalities at work or at home, hold on to that concept of compatibility over trust. The CD-ROM versus the DVD player.
That's the big takeaway.
The next time you experience constant grinding friction with someone, ask yourself, are they actively being malicious, or are they just running a completely different operating system? It's a mental model that can change how you view every interaction in your life.
I'd like to leave you with one final thought to ponder, actually something that builds on this entire paradigm.
Go for it.
We've talked at length about how a neurotypical environment forces that severe stress response autisticization in an HFA individual. But imagine the exact reverse. If you, as a neurotypical person, were suddenly forced to live in a world entirely designed by and for HA minds, a world where direct eye contact was considered aggressive, where small talk was banned, and where rigid routine was enforced by law, what kind of neurotypical alcization or severe stress behaviors would you start exhibiting just to survive the day? It really makes you wonder who is actually being asked to adapt the most.
Wow. Land goes both ways. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning your assumptions, keep seeking out new perspectives, and we will see you next time.